Welcome to Core Concept HQ, where big ideas are simplified. Today, we're exploring Morgan Housel's Same as Ever, a guide to what never changes, a fascinating look at timeless truths about human behavior, money, and decision-making.
That really does set the stage perfectly, doesn't it? Housel's whole premise rests on finding those constants.
Exactly. And our mission, as we dive into this, is to really pull out those core unchanging laws he talks about. Because if you get what never changes, well, that gives you a huge advantage, right? Even when the world feels like it's spinning faster every day.
It really does. You look around AI, all the geopolitical shifts, it feels like constant upheaval. But Housel keeps bringing it back to the human element.
The psychological machine, he calls it. Technology changes, medicine advances, governments rise and fall, but the basic human drivers, greed, fear, hope, maybe a bit of short-sightedness.
Same as ever. It's classic wisdom, really, just applied directly to how we think about money and choices today. Carl Jung said something similar, didn't he?
Yeah.
History doesn't repeat, but human nature does.
Right. We get so caught up in the headlines, the next big thing, the market shifts.
And we completely miss that people are reacting with the same old emotional toolkit they've always had. It's like we have Stone Age emotions trying to navigate a space age world sometimes.
Okay, let's make that concrete. The Snickers story. Warren Buffett. This is perfect, Housel.
Oh, yeah. Late 2009, right? The financial crisis hangover, everything feels broken.
Totally broken. Buffett's driving around Omaha with his friend Jim, seeing boarded up shops everywhere. Just devastation.
And Jim asks him, the big question, how does the economy ever recover from something this deep? It felt systemic, like maybe this time was different.
And Buffett, being Buffett, just flips it. Asks Jim a simple question back.
Yeah. What was the best-selling candy bar back in, 1962?
Snickers.
And what's the best-selling candy bar today? Or, well, back in 2009 when they had this chat.
Still Snickers.
Exactly. Amidst global financial meltdown, incredible tech changes, space travel, computing power, all that jazz. The simple, basic human craving for a familiar chocolate bar, that stays the same.
It's kind of profound in its simplicity, isn't it? It speaks volumes about those fundamental wants. They just persist.
And that's what Housel argues we should be studying, those constants.
Okay, I get that, but isn't it a bit too simple? Like, financial crises involve complex derivatives, global interconnectedness, things that didn't exist in 1962. It's not just greed causing those specific meltdowns, is it?
Well, that's the nuance, right? Housel isn't saying the mechanisms are identical. Of course not. Tulip bulbs are different from mortgage-backed securities.
Right.
But the underlying motivation, the human behavior driving it, the fear of missing out, the allure of getting rich quick, the panic when things turn sour, that part, he argues, is timeless. It's same as ever.
So you can't predict the exact event.
No way. But you can make a pretty good bet on how people will react when something big happens. Greed, fear, risk appetite, tribalism. Those are the patterns. They're the only reliable preview we get.
So understanding human nature is the key, even if the details change.
That's the core argument. Focus on the constants.
Okay, so if human nature is the constant, why are we so consistently bad at predicting the future? It feels like Housel kind of pivots here, saying, okay, even if we know the rules of human behavior, the game board itself is just wildly chaotic.
Yeah, that brings us to his idea of hanging by a thread. The lesson is stark. Look back at history, and you realize just how little we know about where we're going. Events compound in ways nobody could possibly foresee. It's just random.
Utter randomness. And the models we build, they try to account for risk, but they miss the really big stuff, the flukes.
Exactly. They model the predictable, the known variables. They can't model the sheer dumb luck, good or bad, that often changes everything.
And he uses that incredibly chilling personal story. The ski trip, the avalanche.
Yeah, that one hits hard. He's out skiing with two friends, Brendan and Brian, in Lake Tahoe. Conditions were like textbook dangerous, heavy, wet snow on top of a weak base layer, prime avalanche territory.
They did one run out of bounds, got away with it, adrenaline pump.
Right, and then the friend suggests, let's go again, and Housel just stops. He says he didn't have a bad feeling, no gut instinct, nothing.
Just a random, thoughtless hesitation. He just didn't go.
Didn't go. His friends went, and immediately got caught in this huge avalanche. Buried under 6 feet of snow.
Okay.
He didn't make it.
Wow. Just the weight of that. The single most important moment, life versus death, wasn't some calculated decision. It was a fluke, a non-decision.
He says it was far more important than every intentional decision he'd ever made. It forces you to confront how fragile things are, how much is just chance.
It really puts all our careful planning and strategizing into perspective, doesn't it? We optimize the small stuff, but the big swings often come out of nowhere.
And he shows this isn't just personal tragedy. It happens on a massive historical scale. Entire nations' destinies can turn on, like the weather.
The Battle of Long Island, 1776. Washington's army is trapped, cornered. Looks like the end of the revolution right there.
It really did.
Yeah.
David McCullough, the historian, basically said it was game over. The British just needed to sail up the East River and finish them off.
But they couldn't. Why?
The wind wasn't right. Simple as that. A meteorological fluke. The tide, the wind. It meant the warships couldn't maneuver properly. Gave Washington just enough time to ferry his troops across in the fog and escape.
U.S. history changed by the wind. Amazing.
And then there's the Lusitania. Another case of a seemingly small thing having catastrophic consequences.
The captain, William Turner, shut down one of the boiler rooms.
Yeah, purely to save money, save coal, cut costs, little micro-efficiency.
But it delayed the ship by 1 day.
One single day. And that delay put the Lusitania directly in the path of a German U-boat that happened to be in that exact spot at that exact time. Boom, sunk. Massive loss of life. Potentially shifted public opinion towards entering World War I. All from trying to save a bit on coal.
So the takeaway for planning for investing is don't bet on predicting these specific crazy events.
Bet on the constants. Human behavior. Greed, fear, how people react under pressure. That's the only reliable part of the equation.
Which leads right into preparing for the unpredictable. Because if history is just one random compounding event after another, how do you even prepare?
That's where Housel brings in risk is what you don't see.
We're actually okay at predicting the normal stuff, the trends.
We extrapolate. But we're terrible at predicting the surprises. And the surprises, as we just saw, are usually what matter most. The biggest risks are always the ones nobody sees coming.
That NASA story from '61 really drives this home. The high-altitude balloon flight.
Oh, yeah. Victor Prather. Testing this incredibly complex cutting-edge spacesuit. They go up to, what, over 113,000 feet?
Unbelievable altitude. And thousands of hours went into planning for every possible risk, right? Radiation, pressure failure, the vacuum of space.
They thought of everything, almost.
Yeah.
The suit worked perfectly, the ascent, the time at altitude, flawless.
And then he drowns after landing safely in the ocean.
It's just crushing irony. He lands, everything's fine, and he opens his faceplate to get some fresh air. A totally normal human thing to do.
Something nobody factored into the complex safety protocols for that moment.
Exactly. He slipped, the suit filled with water, and he was gone. The one risk nobody planned for the simple human action was the one that killed him.
And this ties into that hindsight bias trap we all fall into. We look back at the Great Depression or 2008.
And we think, how could they not see it coming? It seems so obvious now.
Irving Fisher, famous economist in 1929, saying stocks reached a permanently high plateau days before the crash.
Right. And Robert Shiller checked. Literally 0 economists predicted the decade-long depression that followed. 0.
So what looks inevitable in hindsight was completely invisible at the time. We forget that. We judge the past unfairly because we know the ending.
We do. And Housel's point is, if the biggest news story of the next 10 years is something nobody's talking about today, which is highly likely, then what's the point of detailed prediction? It's almost useless for the big stuff.
Okay, so prediction is out, basically. If you can't predict the equivalent of the pilot opening his faceplate, what do?
You prepare. You build resilience. Nassim Taleb's idea, which Housel fully endorses. Invest in preparedness, not in prediction.
Like living in earthquake country. You don't know when the big one hits, but you know it's coming eventually, so you bolt down the furniture, you have supplies.
Exactly. You prepare for the possibility without knowing the specifics. Constant readiness.
And financially, this means saving more than feels comfortable.
Yeah, Housel says the right amount of savings probably feels a little too much. It should feel slightly excessive, maybe even inefficient, having that cash just sitting there.
But that excess, that buffer.
That's your shock absorber. That's what lets you ride out the risks you can't see coming. The global pandemics, the unexpected wars, the personal crises. If you only prepare for the risks you can imagine, you're vulnerable to the ones you can't. You need that margin of safety. Excess cash, excess time, excess flexibility. That's preparedness.
All right, so if the external world is fundamentally chaotic and unpredictable, maybe the only thing we can really control is our internal world, our reactions, our mindset.
That seems to be Housel's pivot, moving from markets to minds. And he starts with this really crucial idea about satisfaction, expectations and reality.
His first rule of happiness, keep expectations low. Sounds a bit glum, doesn't it?
Maybe a little. But it's rooted in some pretty sharp observations about psychology. He leans on Charlie Munger here, the idea that the world isn't driven so much by greed, but by envy.
Right. We don't judge our well-being in a vacuum. We measure it against, well, against the Joneses, basically.
Exactly. How am I doing relative to the people around me? And because of that, luxuries very quickly become necessities. Our expectations inflate constantly.
The historical angle on this is fascinating. We get nostalgic about the 1950s, right?
Yeah.
Single earner family, the modest house, stability.
Yeah, we paint this idyllic picture. But Housel points out, adjust for inflation.
Right.
Median wages today are way higher, like 50% higher. Homes are bigger. Objectively, we're much better off.
Yet, there's this widespread feeling of discontent, of struggle. Why?
Expectations. Housel tells the story of the France family, escaping persecution in Romania. For them, arriving in America, even living in a crowded apartment and working tough jobs, felt like paradise. Because their baseline expectation was so low, anything was an improvement. They were thrilled.
You start from zero, every step up feels huge.
Totally. Now contrast that with, say, modern Silicon Valley. He talks about Gary Kremen, the founder of Match.com. Worth $10 million back in 2007.
Which nationally puts him in, what, the top 0.5%? Pretty wealthy by any objective standard.
Absolutely. But Kremen was still working crazy hours, 60, 80 hours a week.
Why? Because in his world, in Silicon Valley,
He felt poor. He literally said, "You're nobody here at $10 million." His objective wealth was huge, but his relative standing, compared to the billionaires around him, fueled this constant dissatisfaction.
and now throw social media into that mix, we're not just comparing ourselves to our neighbors anymore.
Oh, man. Yeah. Now it's curated highlight reels from thousands, millions of people globally. Often polished, often fake.
That constant feed of, why don't I have that? It just pours gasoline on the envy fire, doesn't it?
It does. Our expectations just ratchet up relentlessly, way faster than reality can possibly keep pace. Housel basically says managing that gap, actively defining what enough means for you, independent of others, that's a lifelong battle.
Right.
And crucial for contentment.
Managing the mind, which flows nicely into his next idea, wild minds. This one's about the psychology of really exceptional people.
Yeah, this is a great insight. The core idea is people who think differently in ways you admire also think differently in ways you probably won't admire.
You can't cherry pick the genius parts and discard the weird or difficult parts.
Exactly. You have to accept the whole package. The unique mind comes as is, warts and all. We love the fruits of genius, the innovation, the breakthroughs, but we often recoil from the personality traits that enable it.
Like extreme dedication often looking like, well, like abnormality.
Totally. He uses Eliud Kipchoge, the marathon GT. After winning his second Olympic gold, an insane achievement, what did he do?
While everyone else was grabbing their phones, checking social media, talking, he just sat there, staring at a wall for hours in silent contentment.
Right, his teammate joked, he is not human. That level of focus, that ability to suffer and find inner stillness, it's not normal behavior. It's what makes him great, but it's also different.
That dedication is bundled with an indifference to normal social stuff.
Precisely. Same thing with John Boyd, the fighter pilot genius, revolutionized aerial combat, came up with the ODA loop, strategically brilliant. The Air Force needed him badly.
But personally,
Yeah.
apparently he was impossible.
Completely. Rude, erratic, yelled at superiors, disobeyed orders. Housel mentions this lovely detail about him chewing calluses off his hands and spitting them during meetings.
Ugh. Okay, so the genius the Air Force needed was inseparable from the guy they couldn't stand.
That's the package deal. Housel argues you see this everywhere. Isaac Newton, maybe the smartest person ever, devoted huge amounts of time to alchemy and literal sorcery.
Right. We like the physics, not so much the magic spells.
And think about Elon Musk. The same mindset that drives him to pour billions into colonizing Mars, that audacious world-changing vision, is probably the same mindset that makes him ignore social norms, break rules, or make promises he can't keep.
You can't separate the visionary from the parts that drive people crazy.
You can't. So Housel's point is, if you admire the results, you have to acknowledge the wild mind that produced them. You wanted the genius. You got the whole messy, unpredictable package that came with it.
Okay, let's shift back to how we process the world, especially randomness and probability. Housel calls this section wild numbers, and the core insight feels depressingly accurate.
Which is?
That people don't actually want accuracy, they want certainty. We crave black and white answers, even when the reality is shades of gray, full of probabilities.
Oh, absolutely. The human brain just isn't wired for sophisticated probabilistic thinking. We like yes or no, clear outcomes.
He uses that scene from Zero Dark 30, maybe Hollywoodized, but it makes the point. The CIA director grilling the analyst about bin Laden.
Right. The analyst gives a probability 60 to 80%, which is the honest, accurate answer based on the intel.
But the director wants action, needs a decision, so he pushes back. Is he there or not?
Yeah.
Demands that false certainty.
And President Obama later said the raid itself had 50-50 odds of success. A SEAL involved said the odds of the whole team getting killed were also 50-50.
Huge risks. But because it succeeded, we tend to focus only on that outcome and forget just how close it was to catastrophe.
Certainty bias. We anchor on the result we see, ignore the probabilities that existed beforehand. Nuance just doesn't sell as well.
And this bias really messes with our perception of global chaos, doesn't it? The world feels like it's constantly falling apart.
It does. But Housel argues a lot of that feeling isn't necessarily that things are worse than before. It's just statistics playing out on a global stage under a giant microscope.
Explain that, the statistics part.
Well, think about it. 8 billion people on the planet.
Yeah.
A 1 in a million event sounds incredibly rare.
Right? Yes, super rare.
But with 8 billion people, a 1 in a million event should happen almost 3 million times a year, globally. Somewhere on Earth, something incredibly unlikely is happening thousands of times every single day.
And because of global news and the internet, we hear about a lot more of them now.
Exactly. The media needs shocking headlines, so we get a constant stream of the world's statistically inevitable tragedies and weirdnesses, making it feel like chaos is accelerating, even if the underlying probabilities haven't changed much.
What about those 100-year floods or 100-year storms that seem to happen every few years now?
That's the same principle scaled up. A 100-year event just means it has a 1% chance of happening in any given year in a specific place.
Okay.
But if you have hundreds or thousands of independent systems around the world, different economies, ecosystems, political situations, each with its own potential 1% risks, well, the odds that something bad, some 100-year event, will happen somewhere next year, they become pretty high. Almost guaranteed, actually.
It's just the raw math of chaos. More potential failure points means more frequent failures overall, even if each individual port is stable most of the time.
Precisely. And our information sphere has exploded. In the 1950s, your news came from the local paper, maybe a nightly network broadcast. You didn't hear about every flood in Bangladesh or coup in South America instantly.
Now we do. Every earthquake, every market crash, every political scandal, everywhere, all the time, streamed to our phones.
So we perceive the world as historically broken or uniquely dangerous, when really we're just seeing a much wider, more immediate picture of the kinds of crises and tragedies that have, sadly, always occurred. The 1950s look calm in retrospect, but they had massive recessions, the Cold War, nuclear terror. The perception was just different because the lens was narrower.
This idea that perceived calm isn't always real calm leads perfectly into the next concept. Calm plants the seeds of crazy.
Ah, yes. Hyman Minsky's big idea, the financial instability hypothesis. It's fundamental to understanding cycles.
And the cycle is almost tragically predictable.
Yeah, depressingly so. It goes like this. The economy is stable for a while. Things feel good. That breeds optimism.
People get confident, maybe overconfident.
They start taking on more risk, more debt. Businesses expand aggressively. Investors chase higher yield. Why not? Things are stable.
Until they're not. That very stability, the optimism and leverage it encourages, eventually makes the whole system fragile and unstable again.
Exactly. Minsky said stability is destabilizing. A long period without a recession doesn't mean recessions are gone forever. It means the conditions are quietly ripening for the next one. Complacency sets in. Risk management gets sloppy. We forget why the safety rules were there in the first place.
It's a paradox of safety. We see it outside finance too, don't we?
Oh, definitely. Housel's used the example of infectious diseases. Since 1900, deaths from them plummeted like a 94% decline. One of humanity's greatest triumphs.
Amazing progress, but
that very success, that long period of relative safety from pandemics in the developed world, arguably made us psychologically less prepared for something like COVID-19.
how so?
For most of history, pandemics were a known, terrifying possibility. By 2019, for many people, they felt like ancient history, or something that only happened far away. The very calm we enjoyed bred complacency.
So when scientists and epidemiologists were warning about the risk,
A lot of people were skeptical. It seemed abstract, unlikely, because we hadn't experienced that kind of threat firsthand for generations. The decades of safety lulled us into underestimating the risk. Calm planted the seeds of, well, not crazy, but certainly unpreparedness and shock when the unthinkable happened again.
Okay, so we've talked about human nature, chaos, our flawed perceptions. Now, how do ideas actually spread and stick in this messy world? Housel has a very direct answer here.
Yeah, it's blunt. Best story wins.
Not the best idea, not the most rational argument, not the most data-driven case.
Nope. The best story. The narrative that grabs attention, connects emotionally, and is easy to remember and repeat. That's what moves people.
Why is that? Why story over substance so often?
Because people are busy. We're overloaded with information. We're driven by emotions more than logic, whether we admit it or not. A good story cuts through the noise. It makes complex ideas feel simple and relatable. Statistics are cold. Stories are warm.
It explains so much, doesn't it? Why some brilliant ideas explained poorly just fizzle out.
While other ideas, maybe not even that original, but told compellingly, can catch fire and change the world.
Like Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. That wasn't entirely the planned speech, was it?
No, that's the amazing part. Housel highlights. King started out reading his prepared text, eloquent, powerful, but maybe a bit formal, academic almost.
And then Mahalia Jackson, the gospel singer, shouts out from the crowd.
Tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream.
And King just pushes the script aside, looks up, and improvises. He starts telling the story of the dream.
And it becomes one of the most electrifying, emotionally resonant, historically significant speeches ever delivered. That pivot from planned argument to improvised story made all the difference. It connected on a human level.
We see this in the intellectual world, too. Yuval Noah Harari's *Sapiens*, huge global phenomenon.
Massive. But Harari himself admits he didn't do much original research. Critics pointed out that most of the ideas were synthesized from existing anthropology, history, biology.
So why did *Sapiens* break through when maybe more original academic works didn't?
Housel quotes a review saying it was the excellent writing. Harari took known concepts and wove them into a grand, captivating narrative about humanity's journey. He told a great story. The packaging, the storytelling made it irresistible.
It makes you think about what gets remembered, even in disasters. The Titanic.
Everyone knows the Titanic. 1,500 deaths. Tragic. Unforgettable.
But Housel points out other maritime disasters were far worse in terms of lives lost. The SS Qiangye in China, nearly 4,000 dead. The MV Donna Paz in the Philippines, over 4,300 dead.
Virtually unknown outside their regions, right? Why?
Because the Titanic had better story potential. Famous wealthy passengers, the unsinkable hubris, the dramatic sinking, the band playing on, the class distinctions, and eventually the blockbuster movie.
It had all the elements of a gripping narrative. Story potential trumped the raw numbers of the tragedy. Narrative sticks.
Okay, so if the best story wins, what makes us believe certain stories more than others? What shapes the narratives we internalize?
Now we get to maybe the most powerful force. First-hand experience. Housel's chapter, Wounds Heal, Scars Last.
Nothing is more persuasive than what you've personally lived through. Harry Truman quote.
Yeah, something like, the next generation never really learns until they get knocked in the head by experience. You can read statistics, you can hear warnings, but nothing shapes your worldview like feeling it yourself.
Trauma, especially. Financial trauma, physical, emotional. The immediate pain might fade. The wound heals.
But the scar remains. And that scar changes how you see the world, how you assess risk, what you prioritize. Forever.
The example of people who lived through the Great Depression.
Exactly. They experienced utter devastation. Savings wiped out, jobs gone, deep uncertainty, even decades later when the economy was booming in the 50s and 60s.
They remained incredibly cautious, right? Hated debt, prioritized security above all else, saved obsessively.
Their whole psychology around money and risk was permanently altered by that scar tissue.
Yeah.
The experience was just too visceral. It wasn't abstract. It was real hunger, real fear. Housel says their mindsets were harder to repair than the damaged economy itself.
He also shares that really chilling example from post-WWI Germany.
Yeah, a German civilian explaining why people initially supported Hitler. After the hyperinflation of 1923 absolutely destroyed everyone's savings and livelihoods, people were desperate.
They just wanted stability, jobs, food, someone to fix the emergency.
And Hitler promised that. He delivered initially on getting people out of that emergency. And that first-hand experience of chaos, followed by perceived salvation, Housel suggests, made people willing to overlook or accept horrific things later on. The scar of hyperinflation made the promise of stability incredibly potent.
So this idea of lived experience being paramount, it changes how we should think about disagreements, doesn't it?
Massively. Housel argues most heated debates aren't really about logic or facts. They're about people with fundamentally different life experiences talking past each other.
Someone who grew up wealthy debating poverty with someone who grew up poor, or someone whose family lost everything in a crash arguing about risk with someone who's only known bull markets.
Their underlying assumptions, their emotional responses, their definition of risk or security are shaped by those vastly different scars. They're operating from different realities.
So instead of asking, why don't you agree with my logic, the better question is,
What have you experienced that I haven't that makes you believe what you do? Trying to understand the scar behind the opinion. That's where real understanding might begin.
we've journeyed through chaos, human nature, stories, scars. It feels like the final step is learning to live with the inherent contradictions, managing the paradoxes.
Exactly. Housel wraps up with this idea that true wisdom isn't about finding simple answers, but about holding conflicting truths in balance, starting with the rational optimist.
Which sounds like a contradiction in itself, rational and optimistic.
Right. But the core idea is that sustainable progress, whether in life or investing, requires both optimism and pessimism working together.
Okay, how does that work?
He uses the Stockdale paradox, named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, who we mentioned the POW in Vietnam for years.
Right. He survived horrific conditions. How did he explain it?
He said you needed two things simultaneously. First, unwavering faith that you would prevail in the end. You had to believe you'd get out eventually. That's the long-term optimism.
Okay, belief in the ultimate positive outcome.
But crucially, you also had to confront the brutal facts of your current reality. You weren't getting out by Christmas, or next Christmas, or maybe the one after that. You had to accept the difficulty of the present without losing faith in the future.
And the ones who didn't make it?
Stockdale said they were often the pure optimists, the ones who kept saying, we'll be home by Easter, and then Easter would come and go and they'd be crushed. Their unrealistic short-term hopes, constantly shattered, broke their spirits.
So it's about pairing long-term faith with brutal short-term realism.
That's the paradox, and Howells applies it directly to finance.
Save like a pessimist, invest like an optimist.
That's the mantra. The pessimism is the saving part, building that big margin of safety, preparing for the unexpected downturns, the job losses, the inevitable shocks. That ensures you survive the short run.
And the optimism?
That's the investing part, believing that over the long term, innovation happens, economies grow, markets generally go up. But you only get to benefit from that long-term optimism if your short-term pessimism kept you in the game during the tough times. Survival first, then growth.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the next paradox feels even more counterintuitive, especially in our culture, obsessed with optimization, the cost of perfection, or trying too hard.
Yeah, we're taught to maximize everything, eliminate all inefficiency. But Housel argues that pursuing perfection is often dangerous, even fatal, in a complex world full of trade-offs.
Like in evolution, nature doesn't usually create creatures that are perfect at one thing.
Right, because maximizing one trait, say, speed usually comes at the cost of another, like endurance or strength. There are trade-offs everywhere. Evolution aims for good enough across multiple dimensions, not perfection in one.
He uses the example of Robert Wadlow, the tallest man ever.
Yeah, almost 9 feet tall. An extreme outlier. But his incredible size came at a huge cost.
His body couldn't support it, needed leg braces, died young from complications.
Exactly. You can't just scale things up infinitely and expect performance to scale perfectly too. There are structural limits. Trying to maximize height was biologically fatal.
And this applies to business too.
Definitely. Remember Starbucks in the 2000s going for insane growth, opening thousands of new stores every year?
Yeah, they were everywhere.
But Howard Schultz later admitted that relentless push for scale watered down the Starbucks experience.
Yeah.
Quality suffered, the brand got diluted, they tried too hard to maximize store count, and ended up hurting the core business. They had to pull back, close stores.
So when disciplined growth isn't a strategy, there's an optimal size? Maybe.
Housel suggests there's a most convenient size for almost everything, a company, a project, maybe even an ambition. Pushing beyond that, striving for absolute maximization, often introduces more problems than it solves.
Which leads to this final point about inefficiency. We shouldn't try to eliminate all of it.
It sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, think about a grocery store. There's always going to be some level of theft or spoilage or minor errors. That's just a cost of doing business in a complex, messy system with lots of people.
Okay.
Now imagine a store manager who becomes absolutely obsessed with getting shrinkage down to zero. They spend all their time installing cameras, checking bags, creating complex inventory systems,
They might reduce theft by that last fraction of a percent.
but they'll likely destroy morale, slow down checkout lines, annoy customers, and neglect other, more important parts of the job. They've achieved perfection in one tiny area at the cost of overall functionality.
So the real skill isn't eliminating all hassle, but figuring out the optimal amount of hassle to accept. That's exactly. What's the unavoidable cost of success in a real, imperfect world? Trying to smooth out every single bump, eliminate every trade-off. It's a recipe for paralysis or burnout. You end up like the genius who sees all the complexity but can never actually do anything. Sometimes good enough really is perfect.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Unchanging human nature, the folly of prediction, the power of envy, the math of chaos, stories, scars, and embracing paradox. It really feels like the whole point is to stop trying to guess the future.
And focus instead on understanding the things that don't change and building resilience based on those constants.
Right. And Housel doesn't end with advice, does he? He ends with questions.
Yeah, questions to ask ourselves. It's
Yeah.
like internal checks, ways to apply these ideas. Really powerful.
Like the first one. What do I desperately want to be true so much that I may be fooling myself into thinking it is true?
Oof. Yeah, confronting our own wishful thinking. That's huge.
And then, am I prepared to handle risks I can't
Uh-huh.
even envision? That's the margin of safety check. If the answer is maybe no, then your buffer zone probably isn't big enough for the truly unexpected.
What hassle am I trying to eliminate that's actually an unavoidable cost of success?
That's the trying too hard check.
Yeah.
Am I chasing a toxic perfection instead of accepting the necessary messiness of reality?
And the big one, tying it all together. What's the same as ever?
Focusing there on the timeless patterns of greed, fear, story, envy, that's where the real foresight lies, according to Housel, not in forecasting specifics.
Thanks for listening to Core Concept HQ, where we turn complex concepts into simple insights. Subscribe for more timeless lessons from the world's best thinkers.
And maybe one final thought to leave you with, building on all this. Think about the tension Housel highlights between progress and setbacks.
Right. Progress is often slow, quiet, almost invisible day to day, like medical advances slightly lowering mortality rates each year. It compounds massively over time, but doesn't make headlines.
Exactly. Well, setbacks. They're usually fast, loud, dramatic. A market crash, a natural disaster, a war. They grab all the attention.
So it's easy to mistake the noise of the setbacks for the whole story and miss the quiet, underlying hum of progress.
That's the risk. Housel suggests the progress the next century might double or triple our well-being, but it could feel almost imperceptible year by year. The challenge is to not let the unavoidable, noisy setbacks drown out that quiet, long-term, rational optimism. Keep perspective.